This is what people don't remember about me. But if you ask them, they will tell you. First of all, I never missed avoiding. So if somebody swung at me or anything else, the only time they've ever got me in the back of the head, and then, yes, one time an unexpected punch, which I should have blocked, but I truly didn't think this kid had the balls. But he did. So I was highly caught off guard once at Baja. But it only was once and one interaction. There was no second. But the threat of him hurting me with a hit was unbelievably impossible, and he didn't. But that being said, no one hit me. And that's what Larry Lentz and others don't remember from boxing. That I don't really get struck. I block all my punches. So I didn't get hit boxing. And when I struck them, I never fucking missed. I've never missed doing exactly what I wanted to do. And that's why I was so lethal. If I was going to take out and swipe your feet, or take out and suffocate you, meaning hit you in the throat and make you choke or anything, I never missed. There was no second need. I hit the person perfectly. Perfectly. From childhood through immense confrontations, I seeked perfection. And this is what they didn't understand at the TMA, where I would train with people and I would train with power and speed, and they're like, you don't need to do that. You don't know anything about training. And I would tell them, just hold the bag. Do your job as I hold it for you. I let you train and kick and so on. I need to do mine, so hold the bag. So they would eventually just shut up. But also, I needed to know exactly what bone I needed to use, what the rotation of the foot needed to be. Truly, how I needed to hit them at what angle exactly. And I would ask the instructors this, and they didn't know the answer. They knew the moves, but they didn't know how to perfect the moves. That's why I had to do my own independent research, knowing exactly perfectly where to strike and at what angle to strike in, and truly how much force was needed. Show me a martial arts. Show me Bruce Lee talking about that. He flow like water and everything else. But him, Chuck Norris, none of them do the precision I do. So you say they're so much better. That is untrue. But again, I don't believe in that. I wanted to be a lover. I wanted to be with Jen and build out my family and do righteous things with creating a good nuclear family and building out this. I loved her. And I didn't violate my girlfriends. They violated me. I never did any of my girlfriends ever anything wrong. And I did them all great things. I did all kinds of unbelievable goodness for them. Truly, across the board. So I gave them all forms of protection, gifts, mentoring, you name it. And so it's ridiculous. And you say, well, they're better. I never got the opportunity to prove myself. Because every time I do, I have to quit. Everything gets pulled out from under me. Mike Tyson, what did he get? One of the most elite coaches. Do you think Mike Tyson or somebody, he got adopted? And he got adopted by, literally at that time, the best boxing coach in the world. And he died. And that was a horrible thing because he wasn't a bad guy. But he didn't put enough discipline in Mike Tyson. He never raised somebody. He dealt with older, more mature fighters. And he didn't put in the right checks and balances with Mike. But ask Mike about his foster parents. They were 2 white parents. And they embedded in him so much intellectual property capability to fighting and developing him. They made him lethal. It wasn't Michael. It was his coaches that made him. Particular one, but he had several white coaches that were incredible. His assistant coach was with him for a long time. He ended up having to fire him when Mike went and attempted to rape a girl, and he threatened him with a gun. Then he had to fire him. But he had great coaches. Unbelievable. And if you know what puberty does, and you know that training does this, then you have to give that person some outlet. And so they got to exercise their sexual demons, per se. And I turn to creating things. I take all that energy and I turn to engineering or creating and use it in that manner. So I don't have to act out sexually. I refocus that into something constructive. And so I just channeled the energy. But you have to teach them to channel the energy and use it as a life force, no matter what it is, rage or sexual or whatever, and channel it. But I do channel it against my enemies. Believe me, when I get upset, I don't lose and snap. I focus all that internal rage. So when I hit somebody, I hit them with incredible force. And the more I hate you, the more power I have behind it. So make no mistake about it, but I do it with precision. I don't let it misguide me. I focus it and I deliver it all on to you. And that's why every time how I hit people or did things, I devastated them. And so channeling the anger and putting it back on them. And yes, you harness it and then you project it back out. And that is love guiding it, because like with Jesus and everything else, anything you look at King David and they re-guide it and they focus it on destroying their enemies. But they're acting out of righteousness. And that's what people don't understand with Moses, and that these people were doing incredibly wicked things, unrighteous things. And they knew the difference, and the only way to stop them, and you think God is unfair, the only way to stop them was to wipe them out. Because if not, they just repopulate. So you think things are unfair. I read the Old Testament and I understand what God was instructing with David and that. And you think it's heartless, but it's not. That some people need to no longer exist. So again, there's a point, and that's what my frustration with, Charles Manson. Because I get to watch him on TV and then read about him, and not because I wanted to. I just was watching what the population was doing with him and how he was able to go out and be on TV numerous times because it was a big deal for a reporter to get an interview with him. And then, yes, his little swastika. And he doesn't even know what it means. And it really means, it is forward motion, the symbol, because the people behind it didn't do the right things, but the symbol actually means progress, and it does mean forward motion. And just because, like anything, if it's Google and Google turns evil, well, then that's a symbol of evil. So, make no mistake about it. So, again, it all depends on, here, we're at the new Google building, actually. And this runs down lake as well. And so we're on LaSalle. LaSalle has 4 lanes. I would assume this is LaSalle. But the funny thing is, the city makes it difficult, and you wonder why so many people use the phone. When you make things incredibly difficult, you make them dependent on a system, which is GPS per se, because I can't, now I got Jacob something. I have no idea who the hell that is. But I see that sign and so on. That isn't historical. Here we go on LaSalle and Randolph and the Google building. But again, you make them so reliant on those systems, and they integrate these into the Google thing and everything. But they got to understand, when those systems aren't proficient, your signage doesn't give the information that's needed, then people just go away from it. So instead of perfecting their signs, and truly, they don't need to go away, and people perfect their signage, and you perfect understanding, like in elementary school, teach them the hundreds and where the crossover is from north to south and so on. Because remember, you go further enough north, you start going south. You go further enough south, you start going north. Why is that? It's a circle. So further enough east, you start going west. Further enough west, you start going east. Because you're on a circle. So one begins, another starts. And so understanding that, you understand where the trade-off or the crossovers are. Like here, I am west numbers, and it crosses over, and now I'm in the east, heading east. But if I go around, I'll be heading towards the west coast. So, understanding how things trade off on numbers. When you go in far enough in a direction, I'm on north, and I go further enough south, it starts turning south numbers. So one ends, another begins. And yes, you can go eastwardly in a circle, and you can go westwardly in a circle, but I'm talking address, longitude, latitude, when we're dealing with addresses. And so, again, you have to understand how these systems work. And instead, these people, they let their industries go obsolescence. But if I was doing street signs, I would be looking to evolve them so they can stay relevant. But when you start changing the streets with all these honorariums, you really fuck up the adage of signage and the functionality. And people come to town and they're like, I'm on Michigan Avenue. Now it's MLK Drive. What is ML? And then you're going down MLK. How do I get to Michigan Avenue? And it creates these things where people get really confused. And then you say, oh, the internet's taking over everything. No, you're just giving it away through your stupidity. So either you try to perfect your systems as God says, or you get crushed, and rightfully so. So go the other way. It's the fastest way to go out of business. And that's why hiring, even all these Mexican businesses, you have outside competition, but you have inside competition. As I talk to my Asian friends within the Korean community, highly competitive. Oh, in the Korean community, they're ultra competitive at where they know where they finished in class rank. I don't know where I finished in class rank. But they're ultra competitive with inside their structure. Truly. So knife sharpens knife, or iron sharpens iron, or however you want to say, blade sharpens blade. But the whole point is, yes, they're competitive with other Asian communities, but they're ultra competitive with inside their community. That internal competition is what made South Korea, from one of the poorest communities in the world, just as poor as sub-Saharan Africa, they were able to rise out to a juggernaut because of fierce internal competition. So when I got into it, that's how I ended up getting into college planning, because I was around all these Koreans mainly, but some other Asians, Chinese and others, and they were incredibly competitive academically. And I saw that there's a good market there for college planning and for educational planning. And they value it so highly, they will pay up for that type of resource. And my thing was, I went into the wrong community. I understood this from the Asian community, but instead of going into the Asian community with this, even Jen valued it. I was doing stuff for her brother. Gina was at the end of, basically, she was in her junior year, I think, but Charles was just going in, and before he went in, I did planning that I shared with Jen. I don't know if she shared with her mother for Charles, but she understood it. Me and Jen constantly talked about undergraduate and graduate and educational planning and everything. And educational planning goes both athletic and academic merit. Jen played tennis in high school and was highly competitive. She believes in athletics. So she was an athlete in high school. And she believes in athletics. She is highly competitive athletically. Truly, I play her in video games, bowling, tennis, and that. She is super competitive. Even when we went jogging, sometimes she would challenge me with speed in that, which was kind of okay, but she didn't win. But still, it was kind of nice because she pushed me. And so Jackie Jonah Kersey, her husband, was her coach. And he didn't let her let down. They had a great marriage. That was a husband and wife team. And he loved her, she loved him, and he pushed her, and she challenged him as a coach. Truly, she challenged him, and him bringing the best to her. That's why she kept on winning. She didn't let her husband off the hook. If he was slack-acting, truly, I watched them, and yes, she always had the nails, but still, she demanded the best from her husband. If you're going to be my coach, you're going to be the best damn fucking coach you're going to be. And what did he do? He said that to her. You're going to be the best damn fucking sprinter you're going to be. And I'm going to train you and optimize you. And she expects that. That's what I want from you. So they held each other accountable. And I used to watch them all those years through different Olympics and everything. All the stuff, and watching him coach her. Unlike Tina Turner, where her husband, they could have been incredible. His career and her career would have been even more dominant. Truly, they destroyed each other. As good as things happened, that was nowhere near because of the negativity, the fire within inside, meaning the structure that they, the domestic violence, unbelievable negativity. It damaged them both severely. So again, you watch these examples, and there are some great examples. Beyonce and Jay-Z, I haven't seen them do anything that it seems like they support each other really well. So again, they can do a duet. They can do a collaboration concert. And Jay-Z can open for Beyonce, and Beyonce can open for Jay-Z. And they don't have to do full sets. They can give a third artist. You can have 3 acts at a concert. When I went to see, not Billy Crystal, but anyways, what's his name? Jerry Steinfeld. The black comedian that opened from him was awesome. I laughed my ass off so hard. Jerry was good. But he had one opening comedian. He could have had 2 opening comedians. So when you're going to a big concert like that, you can have multiple opening acts. In boxing, when you go to a championship bout, to make sure people get their money's worth, in case, it's a first round knockout, they have, the undercards. Usually 2 to 3 undercards. Making sure people, because in case the fights go quickly, you have enough undercards where at least gives them a minimum amount of action. Or people wouldn't go to those heavyweight bouts. And like I said, it'd be better if Michael Spinks was paired up right. I didn't think he was going to get knocked out in the first round. But as a light heavyweight, he was awesome. But as a heavyweight, nope. He couldn't handle the punch at the higher level. But people don't understand that when you do that, mass times force, or I should say mass times speed equals force. You have to understand that, and he went up and he couldn't, but Roy Jones Jr., he went up and he could handle the bigger blows. And they say pound for pound greatest fighter ever. Arguably, you could argue that Roy Jones Jr., because he won championships at numerous weight classes, arguably no one talks about him. They talk about Ali and everything, but he could be arguably the greatest boxer ever, because he won championships at I don't know how many different belt levels. But again, some people, they need to stay within their weight class, because moving up and moving down, they don't have it. They can't change gears. When you move down in weight, you got to be faster with the hands, faster with the feet. Truly, you got to be faster to reaction. The punches are coming much faster. If you do speed of the glove, and so you have to understand that some people need to stay in their weight class because they don't have the dynamics to move up or down. Some people, like Roy Jones Jr., he proved he could. But Michael Spinks, he didn't do any more heavyweight fights. He couldn't move up. And I mean, that was just unbelievable how fast that happened. I really liked him as a boxer, light heavyweight, but that, in my opinion, ended up destroying his career. He should have did some testing with sparring partners that were heavyweight, that were really good sparring partners, to see how he handles under the pressure, meaning the force, if he can really hold up. That was a huge miscalculation. So you see this, like Roundy, she went to Australia and she was great, but when she fought the Australian, I couldn't believe how fast she tore her apart. And I don't know if Roundy was still at the same weight, or did she move up weight classes? I forget. Maybe she was. But she didn't prepare properly. So I'm not saying that she couldn't have, but it showed that the other fighter prepared properly and she didn't. And that girl destroyed her. It was no match. I felt bad, just like I felt bad for Michael Spinks. I mean, boom. And then I've seen others do the same mistake. And they really don't do their research well, and they put themselves in a place they should never be. Sometimes just staying in your weight class, or staying within, fighting, sometimes fighting for, might not be a good idea. So there's different championship belts. So again, you have to understand these things, and when you want to move out of the European, sometimes it's better to be a top dog in Europe and not try to go international, meaning off continent, and then all of a sudden you get lit up, and basically it's even hard to keep your, love in the European arena. Truly, when you fail substantially, now if you put up a good fight, but you just don't have what it takes, but if you get devoured, knocked out, devastated, like Roundy, it really kind of ends your career. Even fighting within the United States, people are like, well, you don't really have what it takes. But if you stayed within your arena, then yeah, you're the top dog in a smaller arena, but you're still the top dog in a small arena. So Sometimes stepping out of your arena is not a good thing to do. And we talk about businesses. Sometimes being a mom and pop is ultimately the best place for you to stay. Not everybody should scale. Sometimes you can make a good long-term being a restaurant business for 100 years or whatever. And if you keep on tweaking, like there's some old restaurants that eventually, because they didn't tweak. But if they would have had good long-term stints in Chicago, and they would have built up a lot of people coming back for nostalgia, and you build up this base of people keep on coming back to Chicago, like I go to New York and I go to certain places, and they build up, this tourism that comes in. They have a great local base, and they get a good tourist base over time, and so they don't spread. So again, you have to understand these things, basically what you can handle. So it makes a big difference. Like in my prime, that would be the deadliest mistake you ever made, but people didn't tailgate me. That would be the stupidest thing you could ever do. So people didn't piss me off unless they didn't know me. And those were the stupid people. Not being in the know was their immense stupidity. So that's why I say my martial arts teacher, how about my brother Carl? He taught me, he said this, and I always took it to heart. When he worked the door at Mother's, he always says, you don't know who you're going. And this is when I worked in security. And so he said, you never know their capabilities on the other side. So no matter how capable I was very good about assessing the other person. Like Dan Marino at reading the defense fast. I was good at assessing the other person's capability, watching their body language. But they don't teach police that, do they? By watching how somebody can move to assess their capabilities. Really do that. How do they handle the weapon and everything? Truly, how they grip it, how they move with it, tells you their capabilities. So if you watch, say, American Sniper, really, I don't know how well they do it with Bradley Cooper. But again, if you really watched him doing training, like my friend saying, he taught to the police force. He was a consultant. He was an Asian guy. He consulted to the police for certain tactical. But the thing is, when you see how somebody carries themselves, through that you can assess capabilities. Do they just have raw power, or are they more have raw power and they have sophisticated training behind them? Like, I hung out with Buster Douglas. He knocked out Mike Tyson. And I've hung out with, and you have to understand, they carry themselves in a certain way. They might be like Buster Douglas, super nice guy. I mean, truly, just super nice person. It was awesome hanging out with him and everything. Just super nice. I couldn't say enough nice things about him. But he wasn't into, all the hype and fame. He didn't seem, but he was into having a good time. And that's why the second time, I think he partied too hard and didn't train well. And so you could be talking a different story about Buster Douglas if he would have won that second fight against Mike Tyson. And I don't think he trained properly. So you might be talking more about Buster Douglas than Mike Tyson. Truly. And so Buster Douglas, I mean, compare his background and everything. I just think he didn't train well for the second fight, because I hung out with him and he was kind of overdoing it, because Tyson has been there for a while and he's old money. Truly. So you've been there, you experience it, you know, all the glamour tends to not have as much, how do you say, pull or lure, and that's why old money tends to be more sophisticated. But that lends into taking things in stride and not making decisions that are incorrect. And you can learn from that, even if you're new money, this kind of, you know, rationality, like Buffett talks about irrational exuberance. And he's talking about new money, people coming in and getting on the bandwagon and so on. And you have to be a rational actor, and what did him well, him and Charlie in that, Buffett grew up with it, and he's a very rational actor. And Bill Gates and that, they tend to be more rational actors. They don't, you know, go overboard, per se. So, again, you have to understand this, and so you keep this, you know, don't let, like, PCA, the Cubs, I don't know how long they're advertising him and everything. Okay, well, is he letting it get to him? Meaning, that's, you know, the partying, like Dennis Rodman ended up having, you know, serious problems with, I know, alcohol. I don't know about drugs. I never saw him do a drug. But he, seriously, I was around him and he drank like a fish. But he let it get to him, where Michael Jordan didn't. He didn't overindulge. And so you have to understand that Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson's been there. He won many championships. He was old money. And so he's going to go back and refine, and Buster Douglas, I believe, he got caught up in the hype and all the, because it's great, but he was partying like a mother. And I think that's why he went down so fast in the second fight. And so you have to understand this. When you get new money, don't let it get away. That's why lottery winners and that, they get this new big money, and they start throwing money around, and all of a sudden they're bankrupt. All these people winning these big lotteries go bankrupt. Because I understand pent-up desire. And so I worked with an Asian guy, and it didn't work out because of him. Not Ty, but this other guy later. He worked with a lot of doctors. And he's Asian, and a lot of Asian doctors. But he didn't work with those that are just out of medical school. And he said, you know, it's hand to mouth with them. And he didn't understand that all that pent up, and he could guide them in that. He just stayed away from that market. I was trying to work with residents. Truly, I had a whole thing. I went to Northwestern. I wanted to do presentations to Feinberg Medical School. I never talked to Simon about it, but I could have brought it up to him. He worked at Northwestern. I went to the head of the medical school and did a presentation. And we wanted to go in, and I wanted to work with them, because what happens when they get out of medical school, they start making big money, and they start buying things rapidly. Instead of slowly integrating themselves, they go buy the fancy house, the cars, the clothes, and they rack up so much freaking debt, and now here's all their student loans, per se. And now they're struggling to pay their loans back because they go gluttonous. And that's why the Bible, gluttony is a sin. All that stuff is there to protect you. And he could have had this opportunity. Instead, he ignored that market altogether, and that's a market I was trying to get into. Residents and, first, second year physicians, and trying to guide them and mentor them so they slowly integrate and get things in stages so they can pay down their debt and build up their financial security while getting some consumption, meaning getting a Beamer, say, but, renting an apartment. Not super elaborate apartment. Jimmy was, and I was telling him, he was getting ahead. He'd buy the Porsche, and then the apartment, then the grill, then the super. And I'm like, your mother and father invested everything in your pizza place, and you should really be paying them a dividend and redoing things. And he did. He started getting into with their property, and they needed some help, and he was refinancing one of the properties and starting to, take down his consumption and start, focusing on paying back his parents. And so it didn't mean he didn't sell his Porsche or anything, but he started focusing, all that extra money, started focusing a substantial amount back towards his parents. And I wasn't talking about giving big to the church, which he was. He should have given some to the church, but again, he should have focused that internally within the family. And he was over donating to the church. Truly. Over donating. And so I tell people about that. Focus and build out your financials in that. The church should be diversified in how they get their income. And so, again, you need to focus on your life. And so he was giving too much, and that was depriving his mother and father and his brother and that, and he could have built out internal dynamics better in the family. And so I was trying to get him to refocus. Truly, he liked to play cards, and he was getting carried away with blackjack. And all of a sudden now he wants to be this, elite blackjack player. And again, I talked him out of it. I'm like, why don't you focus on perfecting your pizza model in the off time? Focus on understanding your business more deeply. And yes, go around the country and look at other pizza places. Not to steal their intellectual property, but like I went when I was in New York. I had to go to Ray's. And that was back in the first time I was there in the beginning of the 90s for a big U of A, party. Because there's a huge amount of University of Arizona students, like Randy Gerber, Cindy Crawford's husband, and his brother. They went to the University of Arizona. So there's a big amount of University of Arizona alumni in New York. And so I went there and I had to try Ray's. And I didn't actually like it. But the next time I went there, years later, I tried it again, and they changed the pizza a little bit. And it tasted incredibly better. And I was impressed. They updated the recipe, meaning the ingredients. I don't know if they changed the recipe, but they did upgrade the ingredients. It tasted a lot better. Yeah, Michelin, awesome French company. You know, I always thought of Michelin as Asian for some reason. And I don't know why. Truly. But Michelin's a French company, and it's the best tire technology out there, or was. But you don't think of Michelin in France, do you? But it's French. And it's an incredible company. Their tire technology was so superior. They had such a technological advantage. It was unbelievable over everybody else. But you don't know that unless you do a lot of research in the tires. But the margin where Michelin was way above the rest of Goodyear, BF Goodrich, and that. They were far superior. And I'm talking car tires. I don't know about tractor tires or farm tires or any other. But for commercial vehicles, their technology was immense. Now, Pirelli and others have closed the distance. They have substantially narrowed the intellectual property difference. And Michelin should be watching that, because that's your margin of error in your market dominance. And when your Pirelli and others start closing the technology gap, that means your market share is at threat. And so you have to understand that. That's what happened to Intel when they lost certain markets related to the chip market. They didn't watch the technology in their competitors, and that's competitive intelligence, and they closed the gap, and then all of a sudden they had superior technology, and then Intel just sold off that division because they couldn't compete anymore. They didn't pay attention and didn't innovate. And when it's out there, you got to find the top talent. You got to tell your HR and recruiters, we need a better job in drilling down. You got to find those game changers, those engineers that are going to revolutionize, that are going to push the envelope. So here's Riot Fest in Chicago. But you have to understand that it's like Red Bull. Look at all the Liquid Death and all the other competitors. Red dominated the market. But what did Red Bull do? It all of a sudden stopped focusing on its energy drinks and became an entertainment company. Now, yes, they're much diversified, but truly, they're losing their dominance in the energy market. Their demographics, their segment of the energy market, they're really bleeding. And that's because the thing is, when you start doing this, and this is why you have to create wholly owned subsidiaries, because you start diversifying in your avenues of reach, and you start bastardizing internally, because you start style drifting And the reason you do spin-offs is to protect yourself from style drifting. And if you don't, then those industries drift. And it's not because they need to, because there's changing trend. That's just within your industry about energy drinks. But they need to spin them off their entertainment segment from its energy drink. And it needs to be a wholly owned subsidiary. John Hancock does this. Like when I worked for John Hancock, Singapore, their divisions stood on their own, from their annuities to their life to the long-term care, and they have to compete. And us as agents at Singapore, we had John Hancock funds and 401k and that, but as us, we have to do the best for our clients. And so we can't just say, oh, John Hancock funds for this, John Hancock. I used a lot of other vendors because we, as financial advisors and the broker-dealer, they have to be agnostic and do the best for their clients. And so each entity, and if John Hancock wants a piece of the business, they have to compete for the piece of the business of their own team. And that's where knife sharpens knife. I had my John Hancock life wholesaler, Tim, and then Lisa Zanecki. She's Asian, this girl, and was adopted and by a white family, and she married a black guy. That's extremely rare. But again, when I was walking with her, and you can tell, and we're walking, she's taking us to lunch, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and she has, high heels, not stilettos, but higher heels, and, and that gets in cracks. And the sidewalk in Rosemont was broken up where we were walking, and her heel caught, and she was going face first. Well, you can tell my natural instinct, and I'm telling you this how to tell. Just like I pull away from people instinctively, giving them a chance, my instinct is to pull away. Number one, to protect myself. Truly. Number two, to give you a chance. It is natural grace. So I give you the benefit of doubt by moving away. The C. And if you pursue, then protecting myself is next. But on the other side, with her, she tripped in and was going face first into the dirt. And you say, well, I don't, talk about when I did it instinctively, and I reached down and I grabbed her wrist and pulled her up. And she called me her savior. From that face planting. She was bite it hard. I don't know if she would have broke front teeth or broke her, but she was going down hard. But the point is, you say my tracking isn't good. Even then, as she's falling instinctively without a flinch, I reached down and grabbed her arm, because to be able to save her, I had to grab her perfectly around the wrist. Not her upper arm, not her hand. I would have crushed her hand. If I grabbed her hand and squeezed it, I grabbed her right around the wrist. I instinctively went right to the right place, grabbed her wrist, and I pulled her back up without hurting her, having to squeeze her hands or not being able to catch her enough, because getting around her arm in that, her wrist was the perfect place to grab her. But that was all instinctive. Just like when I was hitting the wall with Costa. It's the same thing. He had his seatbelt on because I don't, but still, as I was driving, I also put my arm out and buffered him because he was somewhat sleeping because he was drunk, and I buffered him with my arm, further holding him back. So his head, when we hit the wall, and I did hit it on an angle to minimize because we hit black ice, he didn't hit his head, his arms didn't hit, he didn't get hurt in any way, shape, or form. So the seatbelt plus me. But it wasn't something I had to think about. It was just instinctive. So many times through my life, it's just an instinctive reaction, all built in. So this looks nice with the Chick-fil-A and everything. The Gateway of Illinois by the medical district. And it's nice to see this because you have these nice hospitals, but it's a pretty glim area. It really needs to be a little bit, makes the patients, truly, even at Lurie's and that, like Patch Adams, if the hospital is really trim and drabby in that, the patients truly get depressed. Even at Children's, when I was a little boy and I went in for those years, my brother was in the hospital for years, that they go and help people, give them TLC. So they brought in the clowns, and yeah, my sister used to bring them hot dogs, and she did do that. She'd bring him, he loved these hot dogs, and he was allowed to have them, and he would bring them in for him as a treat every so often. And I used to go downstairs to the McDonald's to eat at the old Children's Hospital because it was in the basement. And so I would go down to the basement when we visited my brother to get a hamburger and that. So I used to know the hospital well because he was in there for 2 years. And so I went to the hospital quite a bunch visiting him over those years. And then when he came home, he had a full body, well, a partial body cast. And he used to scratch himself, and that's because the skin gets wet and starts, But anyways, he used to use a back scratcher, and that's not good. But I spent a lot of time with him, helping him with his, movements and everything, because he was in a cast. And so we built an incredibly strong bond because of all the time I spent with him in the hospital. Then when he came home, all the time I spent with him. And so when he was going through his, trying to quit alcohol, I spent time with him, and that's when I saw the DDTs in action, the withdrawal cycle, and he was shaking. And I was just, giving him tender, loving care and nurturing him and helping him through the withdrawal process, which people don't think you can have adverse reactions from stopping drinking. When you're a heavy drinker and you stop, you can't go cold turkey. You have to wind down. There has to be a form of like methadone, because the detox can kill you, literally. Just like heroin and that. And that's why they have methadone. So you have to really taper it. And my brother had violent shakes. And I was there helping, nursing him and taking care of him. And, he was laying on the couch and his head was in my lap. And I was, holding him and embracing him and making sure, all's good. Truly. So I don't know what his wife did, but he was there and he needed me, and I was there for him. New Zion Church, a missionary Baptist. Okay. So a Baptist missionary church. Okay. I wonder where their missionaries go. And it could be in black communities around Chicago. You don't have to go overseas for missions. Everybody thinks you have to go. No, you can go down the Mississippi in the United States. Now, our church went to Puerto Rico. That's a U.S. territory. But they could have done missions right here in Chicago. So, don't forget your backyard. And so, again, there's all those black homeless people. And so, again, people forget and they want, and it's a thrill, but taking care of things in your backyard, you know, stabilizing and taking care of your backyard, you know, they say charity starts with the home first. And so you build it here, like the Field of Dreams. You build it at home. So it starts internally. That's why you think I did Pacific Gardens, Chicago Care, all these, since I've been a child, all these charities that were within inside of Illinois, within inside of Cook County, within inside of Chicago. So it starts at home, and I've been doing it since I've been a child. So I did outward, but the majority of my work has been local. So I keep on saying, you don't understand, everything's supposed to start here. You keep on projecting it everywhere else, but everything's supposed to be perfected here. I shouldn't have to worry about violence because the Chicago cops are so good, it doesn't exist anymore. The churches are so good, the educational institutions, the businesses, showing me their virtue. So majority of all my blood donations have been here. So again, I focused all this decade after decade after decade after decade here. So I'm looking for the payoff, where I don't have to experience any of this fucking garbage. So again, you know, I'm looking to see if this state is putting itself first. Because you can't do it, and that's why I keep on talking about drowning. You save yourself first. You make yourself stronger. Then you can save the others. You operate from a position of incredible strength, not weakness. That's where I was going. I constantly tried to build myself, and physically, mentally, and everything else, from strength. You keep on wanting to go the way of the shitbag. And you project that onto me. The diabetic, the neuropathy. You keep on going the way of the shitbag. So, that's not the godly way. Do you think heaven is first? Heaven is first. God builds on strength, and he keeps his home team incredibly strong and pure. And like I said, he's fixing a problem to create even more purification. That's what Revelations is about. A incredible cleansing and purification. So again, fixing any problems like this motherfucker tailgating shouldn't exist. Truly, you're a scumbag. So you don't understand Revelations. It's to get rid of people like that. He doesn't care what your justifications is. Keep your proper spacing. As I keep mine, reciprocity, right? The United Center build out. So as I keep mine, I expect you to reciprocate. So again, do unto others as you want done unto you. I treat it with my clients in that exceptionally good. I expected them to do that to me. As I treated Jen with exceptional love, I expected her to give it back to me. That's what God expects. Even Simon said it right, and I'll bring it up again, that if you understand all the love that God has given you, how can't you give God incredible love back? And he said, and he did say, quote, it's unthinkable that you wouldn't reciprocate to God with unbelievable love. After understanding all he's done for you, that you would give him unbelievable love back. After all I've done for my family, my friends, my community, my country, the world, you think there would be this unprecedented love back. And God's watching for the reciprocity. So they got an Uber office. Is this an Uber training course? That would be like awesome. If you got an Uber training course, I think that's an Uber parking lot, but it could be turned into an Uber driver training course. Teaching them how to pick up passengers, how to drop off passengers, truly in different conditions. Like thinking of, like I said on North and Wells, you can drive into the parking garage. They give you 5 minutes and it's raining outside, and you tell them to meet you inside at the second floor, and you take it. They give you 5 minutes to drive in, and they let you out, and they know that people need to be picked up. Now, they could charge you a minor fee for that 5 minutes. So you pay some fee through your Uber system that works with parking garages. So every time you pick them up, it's $1 or something like that to go inside to the parking garage. Because if it's raining out at the front door, like my office building in Rosemont, you come around to the back door inside the parking garage, the Uber, and they pick you up inside, so you're not in the snow, the rain, whatever, or it's a boiling hot day, you're not standing outside. Again, thinking of those little things sets them apart. So figuring out where they set up, and the Uber GPS can do that and tell them that here's a designated pickup spot. So they know exactly where to pick them up. And how do you do this? The tow zones, the no parking zones. Even a fire hydrant, you know, you can pull in front of a fire hydrant and stand. It's no parking, but your car runs and you can just pull away if there's a fire. So you can pull in front of a fire hydrant to pick somebody up or drop somebody off. So the app can integrate that. They can't park and they can't wait long. But again, they can stand there for a minute or two to pick somebody up. And so they can use the parking hydrants as places to pull in. Because here's one right here. It's a no parking zone. But again, you can pull in front of it to drop off and pick up because no one can park there. But you can't just sit there. Your fare has to be, kind of like you're picking them up at the hydrant, and GPS is highly accurate now. So I'm about there, and they can see 1 minute away, 2 minutes away, and they know exactly where you're going to be at the meter because they calculate, and this is another thing, and this is how you take standard GPS, the rate of speed between the stop signs. So I'm on a street and you have to make a complete stop, but that you take that into your algorithm, how long it takes for each stop sign, each stoplight. And so they should be perfecting that through their GPS because they know they overlay from the city of Chicago, and county and state can tell them where every stop sign is, where every stoplight is. And then the GPS calculates your standing time. It calculates your standing time. So you know how long you're sitting at each stoplight. And you can replicate this in any city around the world. How long it takes in rush hour traffic, in non-rush hour traffic. And they're calculating all this GPS data from the Uber and Lyfts and building that into their model. And so can Yellow and Checkered and that. And you're building in. That's your intellectual property. And now your system, because friends of mine, they built one for taxi cabs. A ride-share app for taxi cabs. Now I forget the name of it. But it gave the same capability to taxi cabs, but taxi cabs have a competitive advantage because they can pick people up that flag them down. But they need to swipe their ID through a system. The driver doesn't see it. It's a swipe system, just like they have in taxi cabs, the credit card swipe system. It's in the back of the car. It's in the back of the car. When I pay my taxi cab in New York, the credit card system's in the back. I don't hand it to the driver. The driver actually never touches it and has a button to print receipt. And now they could send the receipt to your cell phone or to your email, and it can give you options of where they get the seat, but you swipe your ID and the camera takes the ID picture and recognizes you. It's an independent third party. The driver doesn't see your ID. And then it gets your pickup, and you got the flag them down, but now you need your drop-off spot. And it tells the driver, you tell the driver your drop-off spot. And now we're talking verbal conversation, and it tells them what the drop-off spot is in that area. But that's all their intellectual property. It's just like the CTA and RTA. They need to be refining their information systems. How many people pay, what type of payment, What type of, they get on here, they get off here, with traffic with Cub games. Who are they playing? The Milwaukee Brewers. Oh, yeah. The Milwaukee Brewers come into town. The Milwaukee Brewers have a good record. The Milwaukee Brewers have a bad record. You're drilling it down because you know the Brewers are coming up, but now this season, record isn't too good. So usually attendance is down. This season, Milwaukee's really good, or it could be like Green Bay. Record good or bad, they draw. So it could be no matter what, when the Milwaukee Brewers come to town, it's like the St. Louis Cardinals. Good or bad, shitloads of St. Louis fans come down. Whether St. Louis is winning or losing, they tend to like to travel to Chicago for the Cubs games. So you have that in your system. How do they perform under? And now it's not only that team. How's the Bears doing? Or how's the Cubs doing? Because Milwaukee could be winning, but the Cubs are really shitty. And attendance is low on the Cubs side. Good on the Brewer fans traveling, but horrible on the Cubs side. So again, this is your intellectual property, building out your systems. But you have to go way beyond the competition in your nuances. And when they do the demographics, what's the age of the people coming to the game? And then you overlay the census data. Truly, they seem to be really good between the, 20s and 35. That 15 years from, say, post-college to 35, they do really well. But the amount of people entering that demographics is going down. Well, then attendance will go down. But people entering that space are going up. And so they know it. If the entering that space is going down, then that means you got to shift to younger and older demographics to make up for that. And so it's going down here, but you now have a marketing trend for 40-year-olds, 40 to 50-year-olds, getting them to come. So again, you have to understand this and build this out. And this makes it like the city of Chicago, Cook County, the DePage, it doesn't matter, Lake County, the state of Illinois. They really need to understand the micro nuances of what's going on so they can understand how things are moving, so they can just tweak the system. If not, they're like, I gotta make $100 million investment, and people are like, $100 million? Fuck that shit. Because you didn't make micro adjustments, and now you want big dollars. And people are like, I'm not giving big dollars. And now there's a fight in the state Senate. I'm not giving money to the Bears. They're spoiled billionaires. Well, if the Bears did it right and created a sinking fund and worked with the state of Illinois, knowing that eventually you're going to need to refresh or you're going to need a new stadium, it could have worked with the body to set aside certain funds into a targeted capital expenditure, CapEx, to reinvest in Soldier Field. So it has money there for the free refresh, and then it has money there for the rebuild. And so they need to do things like that. So all of a sudden your fleet is obsolete and you're like, we need to buy 20,000 new police cars. Well, that shit didn't come up overnight. You're not managing your fleet correctly. You should be swapping out at certain points, so it's a continuous rotation of the fleet. You're phasing out certain older vehicles, phasing in newer vehicles, and you're rotating through it. So you don't get hit with one big CapEx. It's an ongoing CapEx, but it's very small. And that means the new cars won't need maintenance. They're under warranty. Do you know police cars have warranties from manufacturers, right? And new police cars come with that, 30,000 or 60,000 mile powertrain. And you're supposed to be, when you purchase, like I do, I look at the warranties of the vehicle. And when am I going to be exposed to risk? And this is where the Chicago Police Department has all the GPS and those cars and how many miles they drive per day to figure out when they're needing to go to reinvest, when the warranties expire, and when the liability comes on them. And then how long are they going to carry it when they have full liability for the vehicle? How long does the maintenance, when does it become prohibitive? And that's what I did with my Honda Accord. The maintenance became so prohibitive that I bought a new car, because it was cheaper to buy a new car than continue to pay maintenance. So I could get a brand new car with new warranties where I didn't have to worry about maintenance, but the car payment was more expensive. I had none, and I had one, but it was, fairly close to the maintenance cost. So again, they have to figure that out, and they need all that detail. How many times they shoot their service weapon? Because they go in with their service weapon, that's the weapon they should be training with. And eventually the barrel and everything needs to get maintenance, because the barrel gets wear and tear. And so again, the bullets don't come out correctly, and the marksmanship. Do you know when the barrel wears down internally and it gets all the striping, it changes the precision of the bullet? Do you know that? They don't think about that. I think about that. How much the chamber and everything, the firing pin and that, it all makes it too. Because how much does a human life matter to you? And you say they really care. Do you think the chief of police really cares? If he really cares, he would understand this shit. That a few centimeters over distance, if you're off a fraction of an inch, and this is why American Sniper, he can't be off. Truly, he must be off 100,000th of an inch or 1,000,000th of an inch. He can only have that smallest error to make a shot like he did in the movie. That is incredible precision, but snipers take care of their guns and their barrels unbelievably. They take it apart. They teach you in the military, taking it apart, putting it together blind. Taking it apart with no eyesight, taking it apart, fully disassembling it, cleaning it in the blindfold, and then reassembling it. Why is that? Because you'll be pitch black, and you might not have night vision goggles, and you need to take apart your weapon, clean it, and you can't see it, and you can't lose parts. So they have to do it in foxhole situations in the mud, and if you drop something, you're fucked. So they got to take it apart, and they blindfold in perfect darkness, but you can't give them a table. You start with a table, then you take it away. And they got to do it in the field, in the foxhole, or laying down on the ground. And now the weapon jammed, and they got to take apart the weapon, and they can't move, because if they do, they give away their position. And so they got to right there take it apart, clean it, reassemble it, and then make sure it works. So again, they teach you that. Do they teach cops that? They should. Whether it's their taser, truly, or their firearm, they need to know their utility belt, where their mace is. So I'm the blindfold you officer, and now I want you to grab your mace and squirt somebody to the right or left. And you're going to hit a body shot. Or you're going to go for their head. Better for a body shot, you shoot the mace and the taser kind of mid-chest. Why? Because the vapors carry right up. You don't aim for the head. You aim for the middle of their chest. So if you hit it a little lower or above, you still hit it, and it has the effect. Because it's supposed to turn into vapors really quick. And that means it hits the eyes and that once you get the mass on them. But they have to do it blindly. They have to shoot blindly. So it's not only assembling the gun, but hearing somebody and shooting in a direction where you line mid-body. Because you know it's the enemy. So a lot of times you're in these positions, and have you ever been in these woods? I've been out camping in that, and I can't see the hand. I've been in caves too, and I put my hand right next to my face. Unless I touch my face, I can't see my fucking hand. I can move it back and forth, and I cannot see it. So the only thing that does me good is my ears and my sense of touch and my smell. But my eyes are useless. I've been in these environments. And so you're out there in the middle of the desert, and sometimes it's fucking deadly pitch black. And you can hear things, but you can't see things. And sometimes you'll have to make a decision. And so, but do they really teach them how to operate? Firefighters in that, where the room full of smoke in that. Can you get your bearings? So you put them in a room in smoke, you spin them around, and you say, find a door. They know going in where they went, and now they get all turned around. Find a door. And what are you doing? Preparing them for these situations where they lose their perspective to regain their perspective. And so you have to get your spidey senses going. What do you think they throw you in the military? They throw you in a box, and you have your gas mask on, and then they pull it off of you. And you have to control yourself. Because if you start panicking in that, you'll basically suffocate yourself and pass out. So you got to control your breathing and everything and stay calm. So they put you in, they put the gas in, and then they pull off all the masks. And they want to see if you can stay calm. Because if you panic, you're fucked. As your respiration goes up, you breathe more into your lungs and systems, and you're screwed. But these are the things that you're taught to do, and I was very good about teaching myself. My martial arts teacher, Master Russo, he's like, why are you closing your eyes? Open your eyes. No. I want to do it and strike the person without even fucking looking. And I did. I used practice with my eyes closed. And I want to see if I can hit the target. So, you can build these things, truly. And you will strike the target accurately. But this is very advanced. You have to build up, and it takes time. You can't have people hop around. And that's why I talk about American Sniper. He grew up in Texas and that. And you look at the background, and I'm almost positive they show in the movie, he used to be in, rodeos. I guarantee he grew up hunting and shooting. And so, getting into it, using a weapon, that made him. But it was his foundational training. And if we take guns away, and we don't have this base training, the people that had trained from small through, that grew up with hunting and that they'll be superior marksmen. Because, as you know, Jordan in basketball, he had to make up. So he burned the midnight oil training, and he continued to do that through college and the pros, but he had to make up for his lack of foundational training. That those other kids were way ahead of him. And only through purely working his tail off, he could overcome that shortage, because I think it was sophomore year, I forget when. So he lacked that training. Wow, she's cute. I like Asian girls. But the foundational training. And so that did him well when he went in, and he became the greatest sniper in military history. But if you're going to strip it away, then you strip away all this foundational training. And you have to remember what you're doing. I tried to create a trade-off where we create systems that allow certain capabilities to give foundational training, but within parameters. And so you need people growing up and wanting to go shoot the guns and hunting and that, because that's foundational training, tracking, hunting, and so on, and being able to pull the trigger. So I went fishing, and I killed fish. I went shooting, but in the sand. But the thing is, I can do things out of necessity. And so people say, no, I can kill. I don't want to, and I try to do everything not to. But if the necessity is there, then I will. There's a big difference between a want and a need. I unbelievably don't want to. But if I have to, I won't hesitate. Because once it crosses that line, I'm not like Barack Obama. I will pull the trigger. And when you get a president, you want to know when that line is crossed that they're willing to pull the fucking trigger. Because that's the problem. Reagan and that were respected because they would pull the trigger. Not that they wanted to. He did everything, brought the Russians down without invading or anything else. But he dropped bombs on Libya and many other, willing to pull the trigger and do it with full support. That's what Clinton put more troops in. I think at the time they said more troops in more countries than any other president. He had Servios, Somalia, and everything else, but he wasn't willing to commit, give them what they need to accomplish the mission. If you commit, the doctrine says you go in with everything you have. You don't go in half-ass. So you give them the ability to win. What he did, he never put any heavy armor. Somalia is perfect for heavy armor. Putting Apache helicopters, heavy armor, warthogs. It's perfect. Because of its terrain, they operate incredibly well. He gave them Humvees, which I'm not against Humvees, but they didn't have the capabilities that they needed. And you get Black Hawk Down where you don't have the equipment, and then you get your people killed. So when you go in knowing the capabilities you need to accomplish it. And it's better to give more than less in those situations. It's not less is a good strategy. Giving more is a good strategy. Over-supporting is much better than under-supporting. So when you err in excess. Not err in the opposite, under-supporting. Or they call it overwhelming force. But in Somalia, you go in these things and you under-support with, armor and troops, and then you do the operation and it goes south on you. And they had no capabilities, and they had to run with their tail between their legs. And the operation was awesome. The operation was like that Clear and Present Danger where they had all the king drug dealers in one place. Well, in Somalia, it's beautifully, thought out in that way, but poorly executed. They would have captured all the warlords in Somalia in one swoop. It would have really changed the narrative. So the strategy was perfect. The execution sucked. And that means we got all the shipping and everything else that continued on afterwards because they failed on that mission. They could have mopped up every single warlord in one strike and then be able to use them to set diplomacy. Because when in prison, they have to negotiate for their freedom. And that creates, you got the leverage and you can break them and get them to make concessions they otherwise wouldn't. And with that, you can put in tracking and everything else in place. So you can make them give all kinds of concessions with their units. That you need to put in certain tracking and everything else. It's all part of the terms of their release. And it could have changed everything in Somalia. Instead, it got screwed up, and I look at all the people that continue to get killed. Unbelievable amount of lives that got lost. Because they fucked up the mission. So you don't do it back-asswards. Great strategy, horrible execution. And what my partner David used to say, everything is lost in execution. And what did my coaches say? Perfect practice makes perfect. You don't practice. In practice, we practice to be perfect. And then when we execute it perfectly. If you go through the motions, when you execute, you get shit. If you train and do everything in precision, when you execute, the actions become precision. So perfect practice makes perfect. So in your practice, you should be Nazis, and using that in the wrong way, but meaning be really critical in perfecting. And that's what Microsoft and that didn't do, and they lost, and they opened up the pathway to Google and everything. And so Chicago is about to be number 4. If you don't know, Houston's about to overtake us, and then I forget who's right behind Houston. And we're projected to be the 6th or 7th largest city fairly shortly. Not that long. So we fell from number 2 to number 3 to Los Angeles because of massive immigration. And we're about to fall too because Texas had massive immigration. And the funny thing, those two cities, what did they have? Massive amounts of Hispanic immigration. And Chicago fell to number 3 because of that. And California had so many sanctuary cities, but Texas had lots of, not secure borders and that. And we're now going to fall behind Houston. And that means the dollars Chicago gets. And also influence, and then that goes with being number 1 like New York. It gives them a lot of marketing, being the largest city in the United States. They get a lot of recognition on a global scale as being the Big Apple, being number 1. When we fell from number 2 to number 3, do you know what that did? Look at Los Angeles. Look at where Chicago was on a global scale. Truly, not Hollywood. Hollywood helped Los Angeles, but still, Chicago was more dominant. But when we fell from number 2 to number 3, we lost substantial global presence, not only within the United States, but globally. And now if we fall from number 3 to number 4, number 4 to number 5, well, and I'll put it on Tumblr, but you're talking about an incredible, unbelievable loss in prestige, in global recognition, because you're in America and you're the number 2 city, second to none. That carries a lot of weight, but you're the number 3 city. Los Angeles has gained incredible global recognition because it's number 2, second to New York. And so when people think about it, they think dominance, they think power, they think all these positive things. So we're in a fall from number 3 to number 4 and 5, and you don't think that's going to affect us? That's going to devastate us. So you keep on going with these negative narratives, instead of building out, you're fucking nuts. And I watch this global influence and national influence, and literally it's all New York and Los Angeles for the last numerous decades since Chicago fell. Truly, it's all about the Dodgers or the Yankees. Truly, even when they're teams like the Knicks who suck forever, people still talk about them. They talk about the Lakers. And Chicago maintained somewhat because of the Bulls and then somewhat because of the Hawks. But still, the lack of prestige, even when those teams were great, we were still less than New York and Los Angeles. Because as people see, they want to be with Chicago rising. They want to be aligned with a winner. Chicago is a loser. So keep your losing narrative, like the Chicago cops, the worst in the fucking nation. Why would I want to move to Chicago if I know they're so fucking shitty, where you have a 500-pound fucking police officer sitting on Russian division who's sleeping half the time, who can't even get out of the fucking paddy wagon? And yes, he was a black guy. Go back, it's the truth. And I'm thinking, affirmative action. How the fuck does that guy, and he would just sit there the whole time, and I worked on the alumni club, and I'm like, how the fuck can they be employing a 500-pound police officer? And I watched him at times get out, and they had to open it up, the paddy wagon, and he couldn't do shit. And if somebody ran, what was he going to do? He can't chase them. So I learned this. They pulled their fucking gun. So you want out-of-shape, fat fucking cops. And I learned this as a child when the cops were chasing one of my friends. And he got away. And I was right there with the cops. And he pulled the fucking gun on a little kid because he couldn't keep up. He got tired. He was fat and out of shape. Why do you think the military mandates being in shape? You don't get a fucking option. So I don't get it. There's a reason why the military has training table and everything else. And you want these people to be incompetent motherfuckers, meaning physically. And so why do you think they shoot like that white cop? Why do you think he shot that kid with the knife so many times? Because he was trained in hand-to-hand combat? That he was very confident in his capabilities? No. Look at him. He doesn't move with, like, that mother, like, and so go ahead with that narrative. And you see, like, the kid with the baseball bat coming down the stairs. And the cop pulled the gun, and he shot, and he missed. Truly, what poor marksmanship. They put him under pressure. Under pressure. And under pressure, he made a bad shot. And he missed a kid and killed his mother standing behind him. Then with the second shot, the kid was right on top of him. It was literally impossible to miss. So talk about marksmanship. But they already told him in the 911 that the kid was upset and he had a baseball bat. So he knew, like the knife, you know you're going to a knife fight. You know, you can use tasers and other things, mace, truly. But why wasn't their commander telling them that when they're coming to these physical things, there should be, a lieutenant or sergeant right on top of them? Because in the military, when you go into the field, unless you're a sniper and they're in communications, they don't go into the field without their commander right there. Watch the Band of Brothers. And when somebody gets taken out, the next person who's in command. So I don't get it. They allow them to show up to these physical confrontations, and I found out that, oh, that's right, the fat, lazy fucking lieutenants and sergeants. Fucking lazy fucking dirtbag pieces of shit. Truly. Don't want to do paperwork, don't want to do anything, fucking out of shape. And so they're not there commanding the troops. With the firefighters, their boss is right there at every fire. Now, still, they need to get in better shape. But at least they mandate. I never saw a really big, heavy, out-of-shape firefighter. But, again, you think, oh, it's being so mean. How can we call them fat and out of shape? How horrible is that? You're a fat, disgusting fucking piece of shit blimp. How horrible is that? I think, how many people are you going to fucking kill being sloth? So, I look at it differently. They shouldn't be in those positions. And yes, it's true with paramedics. When they've gone to houses and the person's been that big, like the whale with them, how do they move the fucking body? Because they won't fit on a stretcher, and they can't fit down the hallway like the movie with, TV show with, what's his name, who has all those phobias. They had the guy who was so fat he could never leave his apartment. How are you going to bring him to the fucking hospital? If you don't think this is a problem, and then getting down the fire stairs, the building's on fire. And you got a lot of fat, out-of-shape people in front of you going down that stairwell. And you say these aren't risks. Do you know how many people died in 9/11 because they were out of shape? Smoke inhalation hits really quick. They died. They couldn't get down the stairs. But no one talks about how all those people being out of shape contributed to the death toll. Because my friend Eddie, who survived, he is a workout nut. Truly. He went to the University of Arizona with me, and he stays in top physical conditioning. He made it out of the building easily. So I know what I'm talking about. And I talked to him afterwards. And again, those people died. A lot of it had to do with them and their conditioning. So when you say wheelchair access and Tammy Duckworth doesn't have to wear prosthetic limbs and she doesn't have to run up and down the stairs in her prosthetic limbs, I think of how many people are you going to kill with you? How many people, like in Private Ryan, what did they say? Foobarb. fucked up beyond recognition. So these people need to do training, and I don't care if you have a cane in that. You got to be able to navigate, and they should be requiring you got to navigate that stairwell. And you got to train using that cane going up and down those stairs. If you lived in my building, I give you no grace. You got to train getting up and down those stairs. Because other people in the building, as they found out in E2 nightclub and everything else, and they talked about it on planes. Oh yeah, big fat guy on a plane. And you talk about it, and they talked about it, how if somebody falls down during exiting, that body, because the cabin fills with smoke and that, very quickly becomes an impediment, and everybody ends up tripping on them and stumbling, and everybody tends to die behind them. So exiting orderly on the plane, even in emergency, is critical that person doesn't fall fucking down. Because if they do, like I watched the ones in Whitesnake with the burning, once that person went down, all the people piled up behind them. And you just get all these people stacking. And you can't get out. So a problem is people can't trip and fall. And if you got big fat fuckers, and this is why I hate fucking lawyers, they don't give a shit. And they're like, but they have a right to be a fat limp. I don't want you in a movie theater with me. Because your ability to exit affects my ability to live. And so you have to understand this in capabilities. And it's understanding this, you understand you have a responsibility. Everybody wants to take away their responsibility and say, I have no responsibility to anyone where I go. Well then, when the shit hits the fan, you all die. The strong is the weakest link. So, me getting a building, I was going to buy a 3-flat. Do you know where I was going to put my mom? On the first floor. Do you know who is going to take the 3rd floor? Me. But when I went into buildings, I took the upper floor because I was more capable. So we lived in it. We didn't have the greatest of views. Trees were blocking and everything. But going up and down the stairs, I was more capable than the black guy on the 2nd floor or the Asian girls on the 1st floor. So, like when I sit in a plane, I take the aisle because I got to go to the bathroom. Movie theaters, I tend to sit on the aisle because I tend to have to go to the bathroom. And I don't want to step over people and disturb their movie. I don't want to disturb people sleeping on the plane. I have a small bladder. I love the window, but I always take the aisle. Why? Because I think of them. And so again, you have to understand this. And when you go in these senior buildings and they have this guy in a wheelchair and I'm like, when the shit hits the fan, if anything ever happened, you people are all dead. And then the people that are trying to help them, they're dead as well. So, the drowning scenario, which was a hard reality, and I keep on going back to it, but my coach, he's like, sometimes you can't save them and you got to let them drown. So, again, you got to understand that. And so when people come in that and you hobble people and you take away their ability, I think I can't tread water now because of the arm movements and the shoulder. I would only be able to survive treading water for a short period of time. I used to be able to tread water as long as I wanted. And I practiced. Do you know I practiced survival? And I could tread water for hours with no problem. I could float on my back, no problem. You've taken away my ability to save myself. And they did in the first breakdown, and now you did in the second breakdown. You keep taking away my survival. And then, you motherfuckers, you allow people to fuck with me. I would put a hit on them and put a bullet right through their fucking head without hesitation. It would be a no fuck with zone. But you don't understand. I understand, like with my mother and all that. I was in a monitoring system. I talked to my sister about it. Many people can validate all of this. And I did this with my clients that were going to the Philippines on missionary. They wanted to go there. They wanted to help. And I did an assessment on all the hospitals in the Philippines and with air evacuation and everything else. He didn't do it, but they relied on me. And I went through it and I pulled everything up and I said, you can't. Because her conditions in the nearest medical center, she's going to die. So, staying in the bigger cities like Manila and that on vacation, you're fairly decent. But you have to understand the cardiologist specialist. And I have to go through and look this shit up. And thinking, okay, can you? I'm like, nope, they don't have the capabilities. So you can't go to the Philippines. So when you're assessing this, you have to start with the vulnerabilities and the capabilities to take care of the vulnerabilities. And that's what I do for my clients. Now find another financial planner who cares that I set up organizations for my clients and many other things. Because I truly care. If I take you on as a client, I care about you. And I'm not bullshitting. And so I've gone to extensive stuff on Sundays with medical, being on the phone, looking things up with Kang. They're Korean. The mother was going in, but she's a policy holder. And so Sunday, I got to look things up, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm sitting on North Avenue. They called me. I pull over, and I'm there for hours reading through policy stuff and that, and calling him and communicating with him as his mother's getting admitted to the hospital and that, making sure everything is good. So it's a Sunday evening, and it's an emergency, and I'm picking up the fucking phone. But you take responsibility. Don't get in the fields and take people's life into your hands, and you're not going to pick up the fucking phone? I pick up the phone. I've had many clients. I had a client that fell and broke her hip. And I was there and everything through it, and then I had to take care of everything with the estate afterwards. It took me literally years to settle her estate. Years. Working through with her executor, taking care of her estate. Do you know how much money I made? Zero. And I talked about the stuff beforehand and afterhand, and she should have never ended up in that situation. But I take these things deadly serious. How serious do you take your job and handle with your clients? Because a true professional, they take their job seriously. Whether I was waiting tables, making pizza, I respect my profession and take my job seriously. And this is why I get so frustrated. Like, I was a kid and I was already managing Sbarro's. Pete trusted me with everything. I made all the pizza sauce, all the dough, all the calzones, meatballs, you name it. I did all the inventories. I did everything. Truly. Besides all the cleaning, too. But he had absolute confidence in me. But I took my job, and you don't understand the Protestant work ethic. It's a job. I'm not here to fuck around. You go to the playground to play. You go to work to do your fucking job. So I go in these places and it fucking drives me crazy. I'm like, you're kidding me at Chipotle? That they fuck around? And it's like, what type of ragtag piece of fucking shit operation? And then you see the Chicago police force and everything, and you think, you're spending all those millions of dollars. It costs, what, $1 million or $2 million per police officer? And you don't demand the utmost out of them? What the fuck? And they have the ability to deal with life and death situations. And you want somebody like somebody who is a paramedic that can't give CPR, that gets tired after a few pushes? You got to be there doing CPR and being able to fucking do it and continue it for, I don't know how long is the minimum standard. But they need to be doing it for a while. But again, you take these people and you're like, oh, you can't have this. And then they got all the fat people as flight attendants and that because they said, that's discriminatory. And I'm like, hold it. We had 9/11, right? And I said this way before, but you have 9/11, and then you got all these people that are fucking out of shape, or like John with a hip transplant, and they're going to fucking fight off a terrorist? Oh, that's right. They couldn't fight off a terrorist. That's why the planes crashed into the buildings. They had box cutters. Until those people on the plane, those passengers had to stand up. Because the flight attendants couldn't do their fucking job. Because one of their jobs has to be kicking ass. And I used to be friends with flight attendants, and we used to talk about this all the time at Baja. And those girls understood. And they actually understood they have to get physical, and they need to stay in shape. And none of them were fat. They were in shape, and they knew at times, and they used to tell me stories where they had to, physically handle people on the plane. So I don't get it. It's not only serving, you got to be physically capable of handling situations. You can't be a flight attendant. So, again, they have to understand this. They're the first line of defense. So you keep on going the way of lowering standards, and I see the 500-pound guy sitting in the fucking paddy wagon, sleeping most of his shift, because 500-pound black guy, affirmative action. Well, okay, but I'm telling you, if he had to do CPR on somebody, and that person's going to die. Like the black female was a sergeant. Why wasn't she giving Eric Gardner CPR? Why didn't she order the cops after he stopped breathing doing CPR? I look at things like that. Don't they know CPR? Shouldn't they have been administering CPR to him? She's the boss, and she should know CPR better than them. Because if you're the boss, you have years of experience getting trained in CPR, right? And you go through all these recertifications. And so if you're the sergeant, you have some great experience of doing it. So if they can't do it, you can do it. But she wasn't down there, giving chest compressions and giving him breaths and saving him, was he? Because just because he stopped breathing doesn't mean he's dead. So again, I look at those situations and I'm like, I don't understand. Why don't they train them effectively? As we have all these women going in the military, they need to be trained effectively and be able to do their job.